Alright, we are bringing Eald'Narche to Trey's stage here. To Trey's last chapter, and we're also bringing Trey because he's really good here, and I enjoy playing him. We'll start with Grand Delta because why not? It's going to add Brave damage. The debuff is going to add Brave damage and cause an automatic break whenever the enemy takes a Brave hit. My Aerith only has 1 ingot, so she's going to start with Prayer of the Cetra to up her attack. And my Eald'Narche has no ingots, so I guess I'm trying to decide here how to start. When the battles are shorter like these, it's better to go into Eald'Narche's phase shifted mode quicker. Although it's a good thing I didn't, or he would have died there, shoot. What else to talk about? So now would be a good time to add Trey's LD. Keep in mind when using Trey's LD that the Brave hits are only to one enemy, so it's actually kind of handy if you need to break, if you need to fix a break order that's breaking in the wrong order. And now we'll Fade Shift and go straight to Exceed Lance because the enemies are about to take a whole bunch of turns right away. And this will give Eald'Narche a bunch of free turns through Warp. Through his Warp debuff. And Aerith is going to get knocked way, way back. Now I have to be careful because B's Orb is getting really low. But obviously B is just going to take their turn pretty soon. I use Stellar Burst. I want to charge Eald'Narche's EX. Vortex Plus as quickly as I can, and on free turns Eald'Narche's HP Plus does not charge his EX at all, only using skills does. I'm going to Omega Javelin here just to make sure I get that Vortex Plus ready, otherwise the run is likely to be ruined. I mean, I can't guarantee it, but yeah, it's likely. And there's the Vortex Plus. Not only that, but I want to make sure I apply Terror before Eald'Narche's C65 ability wears off. Wish I could talk a little bit more about Trey here. This probably isn't the best team to have for Trey specifically, but it's also not the worst. I think Trey is better with batteries. Y'shtola is actually really good to pair up with Trey. I will say Eald'Narche is not the worst because Eald'Narche provides a lot of defense down, and you want your Trey hitting hard because Trey has a lot of hits in his kit. Obviously the EX is kind of an exception to that. It only hits like 8 or 10 times or whatever the number is. But I'll talk. Like if you think about it, Trey's skill 1, Raining Arrows, it's shoot, I don't remember how many times off the top of my head, 4 times or 6 times. Guess if I'm going to talk about a character, I should at least know what I'm talking about. But it hits a bunch of times. It's like 4 or 6 times on the first of a lot. On the first, when you use it. And then, over the next 3 turns, if it's charge 2, which it should be a charge 2, quite frankly. But if Rain of Arrows is a charge 2, then on the next turn, it will hit another 4 times all enemies, and then it will do it again on the second turn and again on the third turn. So that's what, 4, 8, 12, 18 or 12. That's like 18 hits for Trey's skill 1. So you want that's 18 hits with 4 HP dumps on Trey's skill 1. So you want that skill 1 to hit hard. You want that attack to be up, you want the enemy's defense to be down. I don't have an Imperil Enchanter here, unfortunately, but there's so much defense down going on between Aerith and Eald'Narche. And then with Trey, he brings his own Brave damage up with a couple of debuffs, like... He's still going to be hitting hard enough. So, let's see, I'm just debating what to do here with Eald'Narche. One of the nice things about bringing Eald'Narche to this stage is Terror functions a bit like Paralyze, where it can often stop the enemy from continuing whatever their cycle of attack is. Like, one of the unique things about these enemies is they don't have a recast gauge, they just follow their cycles of attack. And so Terror, just like Paralyze would, freezes them in it. Keep in mind, HP Silence from RCL or Kefka does not necessarily always do this. It depends on the battles. They make it weird, but Paralyze and Terror actually follow a different set of rules from HP Silence, I've noticed. Anyways, the reason I bring that up is because at some point these enemies will give themselves a yellow aura and then reduce all brave damage to 1 brave damage until they're broken, which Trey can easily get around this with his Fatal Arrow debuff. So it's not a big deal when you have Trey, but it's actually never going to happen because Eald'Narche will stop them from continuing their cycle with his Terror debuff. So that's interesting. More reasons for me to like Eald'Narche. So let's talk about Trey's second skill, Dynamite, a bit. Dynamite has a bunch of hits too. It hits, this one I believe does hit 6 times at charge 2 when he uses it. And then when it explodes, it hits another 4 times against all enemies. So we have 2 enemies here, so that's 14 hits. Off of his skill too, with 3 HP dumps. And then, of course, it batteries him in between them and stuff. Here I'm just checking. That's one thing you definitely want to get good at when you're using Eald'Narche, is checking the debuff tick. Because so this might be a good example of this. I believe Terror has worn off of A. Yeah, Terror has worn off of A. Probably could have waited another turn for B if Terror hadn't worn off of B. But anyways, there are times when I will let Terror wear off one of them and then reapply it before they get a turn again. So that's something you can definitely do to extend Eald'Narche's longevity. Like, they don't need to have Terror up all the time, as long as the enemies have it before they get their next turn. I'm going to reapply Firewall here, which also has a bunch of hits if you think about it. I don't know if I want to do the math on that right now. But yeah, with Trey, up the attack, lower the enemy's defense, get him hitting as hard as he can. I was a little disappointed when I found out his high armor was going to be attack, because I thought, Trey rarely breaks the cap of attack. You know, give him something that's going to help all of the allies, but you know, at the same time I understand it. He can definitely be used as a damage dealer with all his hits and HP dumps. He's a little like Emperor in that sense, where Emperor also has multiple hits and HP dumps, only I feel Trey does it a lot better, quite frankly. Which we can argue about, but I guess there's not much of a point in arguing about that. Clearly I didn't pull for Emperor. Although I do have Trey at 3-3, and I feel Emperor can definitely, as far as ingots, I have Trey at 3-3, and I feel like Emperor can be run effectively at 1-3. Can be used effectively at 1-3, so there's that. I wouldn't run Emperor at less than 1-3, but that's for another video. Emperor is not here. Alright, checking to see Terror and Warp. They have 2 more turns of it, and so does A, I'm sure. So I want to make sure Vortex Plus is up in time. So we Stellar Burst. It's not happening here because we all have so many frame debuffs, but Stellar Burst can apply a speed down, which can help with Eald'Narche, especially these battles with shorter turn allowances. Or I should say quicker enemies. These battles with really fast enemies, they can burn Eald'Narche through his debuffs too quickly, and so it can help him to slow them down. Even though technically the faster the enemies, the more likely Eald'Narche is to make use of all those free turns. But yeah, with these really fast enemies, it's better to slow them down. And Eald'Narche also has a generic defense down debuff with his Omega Javelin, which you won't see here, because I am using too many debuff slots. But that's something to keep in mind. Sometimes we can forget just how much defense down. Why did I bring my calls? I don't know if I even end up using most of them, to be honest. I think I brought them as Imperil Enchant, because my plan is to eventually swap Eald'Narche out for Ramza when Eald'Narche pretty much burns out of all of his skills. And I'm hoping that between Ramza's delay with his EX and using Odin at the end, that I can bring the enemy down low enough to be finished off before they actually get a turn, after Eald'Narche kind of burns out. And so, for that reason, I also brought Imperil Enchant calls. I don't want to really ever use Celeste at this point, because she could apply a lock framed debuff, which would take up one of the debuff slots, and well, I don't want to do that. Once Eald'Narche burns out of his skills, though, I will have some debuff slots freed up, and then I can go do the Imperil Enchants. Krile brings a Paralyze with her Imperil Enchant, so I have that just in case it's needed. It can be used as a secondary Paralyze. Krile is really, really good when paired up with Trey, by the way. It's just tricky to do sometimes because between Krile and Trey, you don't have anybody who heals, and so your third slot has to be healer, and then between the three of them, somebody has to take up, has to deal with the orb if Trey and Krile aren't able to do it. So it can be tricky to build them together, but because Krile is able to battery off turn so well, she's really great for him, and Imperil Enchant. Trey really likes battery, especially off-turn battery, which is pretty rare. I used to run Trey a lot when he first came out a long time ago with characters that had HP dumps that would also battery your teammates. So again, like Y'shtola is a good example of that. I ran him with Porum a lot for that reason. Fujin. It's a little less common at the moment, but I'm sure it will pick up again. The enemies are really buffing up their defenses now. And so we're going to use Omega Javelin right before Eald'Narche's additional effect, or C65 or whatever, wears off. So that way we can get the full 4 turns of warp. 4 turns of the warp debuff on the enemy. Ooh, a launch. Yeah, I was like, oh, do I want to use Celeste's call so I can battery on this launch? But then I was like, no, I don't want to get a debuff slot used up, stuck basically on A. Yeah, this team just absolutely destroys this fight. I practically didn't even need to bring calls. Of course, I practically didn't even need to bring Ramza, but that's for later. So you see what I mean, though, by Rain of Arrows appreciating being batteried, or Trey appreciating being batteried in those Rain of Arrows hits. That's where I think he and Krile would really shine together. Another launch. Trey isn't a launcher per se, but with all his hits, launches start to become available. Alright, I'm making sure debuffs are set up the way I want them to be. And then we will do the HP attack here. And then we're going to get another turn right afterwards. Now with Trey, I will also say this, when it comes to his LD, in order to get the most of it, you want to not use it until the debuffs have fully worn off of the enemy. And the reason for that is, if you use his LD early, before the debuffs have fully worn off of the enemies, then they technically don't get all of their hits in. I hope that makes sense. If not, leave a comment, I'll explain it a little better maybe. And we are also doing something a little unique when it comes to an Eald'Narche run. We are breaking in the correct order. A lot of times when you get counter-attackers, so to speak, you want to break them out of order to give them more turns so you can get more counter-attacks in. But, and while Eald'Narche isn't specifically a counter-attacker, he does become more powerful when the enemies get more turns. But these guys are so frickin' fast that I just want to break them in the correct order anyways. Plus, with my Eald'Narche being below 2 ingots, he can burn out slightly quicker than he would if he had 2 ingots, due to the fact that he doesn't get to apply terror upon phase shift. So, more Grand Deltas, which is arguably one of Trey's weakest abilities, especially compared to his other abilities, but it applies that Fatal Arrow debuff, which is a really good debuff. Haven't messed around with Trey's calls too much yet. Can't imagine them being that wonderful. It'll be interesting to see if we're able to figure out good uses for them or not. Alright, Vortex Plus is up. They still have one more turn of Terror, and they have Warp. So what I should do is use it anyways, because the additional ability is about to run out, and so I want to get Terror on there and then Warp reapplied, so they both get applied at 4 turns. But if that weren't the case, I could have held off until enemy A took one more turn and then applied Terror. So here we will likely Omega Javelin. And now they have... And now A has lost its orb and gotten its permanent red aura. I typically prefer Raining Arrows over Dynamite Shot. I'm pretty sure I'm making the right decision with that. I haven't really done the math outside of it just appears to be better because Rain of Arrows is getting more hits. It certainly leaves Trey more vulnerable to breaks, but when you have Eald'Narche on your team, that's not a problem. That's another great reason why I think Eald'Narche and Trey are actually pretty decent together. Is Trey can often be left open to being broken with his constant Brave Dumps, and Eald'Narche can prevent that from happening. We're doing pretty well here. Let's see, we're 2/3 of the way through our available turns, and they are lower than 33%, so we are on par to win this. And we haven't even used our summon yet, which will give us free turns, so yeah, we're definitely on par to win this. I did a Ray of Hope right there with Aerith, just to try and give people battery. The battery reduction here is real. And Trey appreciates that battery. I probably should have done that a long time ago. But oh well. Keep in mind, calls can cause Trey's abilities to tick or activate. So for example, if Dynamite Shot has 1 or 2 ticks remaining, you can use a call and that will drop the tick down 1. Same with Rain of Arrows, you can use a call, like if Rain of Arrows was up, and Aerith used Krile's Ray of Hope, that would battery Trey and he would immediately Rain of Arrows right afterwards, or it would trigger right afterwards. So that's something to keep in mind. I'm not sure if Trey using a call though ups his skills from charge 0 to 1 and 1 to 2. I know his AA does. I would imagine the calls don't. Checking to see how many terrors and warps. And we've got 3 on B. And we've got, I think, only 1 terror left on A, which is a little awkward, but unfortunately can happen sometimes. But Eald'Narche is getting pretty close to running out of skills and debuffs. Hasn't quite run out though. Stellar Burst to get that EX charging up, and of course Supply of Speed down, because man, they are super fast right now. And this is an interesting point, because it's like, do I use that Omega Javelin and charge the EX, or do I just have faith that it's going to happen by the time A gets another turn, because Terror has worn off of A, from what I can tell, and the faith has paid off. And oh, it's worn off of B too, so might as well reapply it here. They should still each have at least 1 more turn of warp. Unfortunately, A is getting 2 turns in a row. Get that Fatal Arrow back on, and then next turn Trey will use his LD, Firewall. I should be attacking B here, because B will take more damage. I'm probably just double checking the debuffs. Although I don't know if B has Aerith's debuff. I don't think B does, but A might. Yeah, regardless, that hit really hard. And now they have the 4 turns of warp. I'm obviously playing super careful here. So now at this point, Eald'Narche is pretty much out of skills, and so I'm going to ride out the last few tears and warps and then summon Ramza. Ideally, because Ramza has, the friend Ramza has his burst, I want to get Ramza out and have either Trey or Aerith take a turn right afterwards, so that way I can get Ramza's burst going and then summon, because Ramza cannot use his burst. And then a fun little trick with Eald'Narche that I constantly point out, admittingly, is if you bring your ally out on one of the free warp turns, your friend unit gets an extra turn. So that can be nice with certain friend units that would benefit from having an extra turn. Unfortunately, Ramza is not really one of them. Like, a 6th turn for Ramza, you know, I guess he can HP +++ an extra time or something, or Galvanize, but it's nothing amazing. With a friend Emperor, it could be pretty nice because you could get you could get an HP +++ with Emperor and then have all the traps go off an additional turn if you time things right. So it's good with some friends, maybe, and less good with others. I'll probably do that here. I'll let B take a turn, and then I'll pull Ramza out on the free warp turn right here, and then I will use Ramza's burst because, yeah. Oh nope, I'm not going to. They must still have. Nope, he's got warp, so I'm gonna have to do this before. I don't want to break B here, that's for sure. If I break B here, he'll jump in front of A. And A no longer has terror, so this is a little risky. So much for playing safe. Yep, Eald'Narche takes a hit. Alright, and that's the last turn for warp on A, and A is going to take a turn next. And okay, so yeah, now I bring Ramza out. I guess I was just really hoping that that wasn't going to kill Eald'Narche. That was pretty risky, I didn't need to take that risk. But here's the Ramza burst, which, when you see how much damage that does, yeah, that brought them down by 2%. Like, Ramza's burst was absolutely not necessary. I did not need to play as risky as I did, but whatever. Now we'll use Gal. No, must be charging up. And we'll get that Imperial Enchant going, in addition to Ramza's burst. And Trey's going to hit very hard. Look at that damage. Oh man. Although you think that was big damage? Wait till you see these launches. Oh, well, I guess that's regular damage. But anyways, yeah, Trey is hitting very hard under that burst effect, so that's pretty nice. Here's Krile, because I have free debuff slots, and why not do some extra damage here? And they're dead anyways, so yeah. I played a little riskier than I needed to at the end, but it's still going to work out. And that's that. Now that's a big damage launch right there, jeez. So Eald'Narche cheese for the win. And it's fun using Trey, you should pull him too. I highly recommend him. And there's Trey at 3 ingots, Eald'Narche at 0, and Aerith at 1 ingot. I will now go into the party screen to show the number of ingots. My Trey is not purpled with armor though. I'll probably bring that up one day. So no EX boards and no EX passive. Thank you for watching.